I stood behind the curtain of our dining room, the old lace brushing against my fingertips, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Outside, the backyard was a sea of laughter and balloons. My family, my blood, my legacy, 25 people gathered for our 45th wedding anniversary. Karen had made sure the decorations were flawless, the tables symmetrical, the camera crew perfectly briefed. She looked stunning in her navy blue dress, the one I bought her for our trip to Charleston 2 years ago. She wore it today without flinching. But I knew. She was walking across the lawn with that artificial grace she wore like perfume. Polished. Precise. As if nothing had cracked. Not our marriage, not our trust, not her soul. I found out 3 days ago. It wasn't planned. I wasn't snooping. I was trying to help. Our youngest grandson, Caleb, was messing with Karen's iPad, and it wouldn't unlock. I typed her usual passcode. Wrong. Then I tried my birthday. Then our anniversary. Still wrong. I should have stopped. But I didn't. Finally, it opened. There were messages. A hidden app. Screenshots. One folder. Labeled simply, J. And that's when I found it. The pictures. The hotel confirmations. The cash withdrawals. Messages that made my stomach turn. My wife, the woman I gave 45 years of my life to, was not just having an affair. She was treating it like a second marriage. There were date nights. Matching bracelets. Pictures with him holding her waist the same way I used to when she made French toast in her robe. I felt like I had been peeled out of my own life and replaced with a background extra. That night, I sat in the garage until dawn. No crying. Just numb. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. But my brain went to war. I started printing. Compiling. Chronologically. I spent hours turning her lies into receipts. I didn't know why. I just knew it needed to be done. Like a man pulling his own tooth, slow, ugly, but necessary. I copied everything onto a flash drive. Bright red. Hard to miss. Then I made backup copies and stored them in places she'd never find. Glove compartment of my truck. Bottom of my tackle box. In the freezer behind the venison. I wasn't being paranoid. I was being careful. And when I say careful, I mean dangerous. Today was our anniversary. I didn't cancel anything. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Let her have her perfect stage, her perfect hair, her fake smile. Let her perform for the family one last time. They say if you truly want to destroy someone, let them believe they've won. At 2 p.m. sharp, the photographer started setting up in the yard. Karen called everyone to gather, big smiles. This is a once-in-a-lifetime moment. Her voice was sugar and static. I walked out slowly, tucking the red flash drive into the inside pocket of my jacket. My heart didn't race this time. It was cold, methodical, like someone else was living in my skin. Hey, Grandpa, Josh, my eldest grandson, nudged me. You okay? I nodded. Yeah, buddy. Today's gonna be unforgettable. And I meant it. Karen was glowing under the sun. That kind of glow you get when you think you've buried everything dirty under 20 feet of charm. She kept looking at the photographer, never once looking me in the eye. Not once. That's when I knew she thought I didn't know. She believed she'd fooled me. And that was her final mistake. I don't want to give it all away. Not yet. But understand this. What happened after the camera clicked will never leave the memory of anyone who stood in that backyard. Not my grandkids. Not my children. Not Karen. Especially not Karen. The sound of that shutter clicking, it echoed like a countdown to something none of them saw coming. They thought they were capturing a legacy, a tribute to endurance, love, and family. But I knew better. That photo wasn't a memory. It was the last page of a lie, framed in sunlight and artificial grins. Karen stood to my left, her hand lightly brushing my arm. I didn't flinch. I didn't need to. That tiny contact told me everything I needed to know. It was her last gesture, her final insult, touching me for the sake of the image, not because she wanted to. Her hand was cold, and so was I. After the photo, the kids rushed to the tables, barbecue, peach cobbler, the punch Karen made with fresh strawberries from the farmer's market. Laughter swirled in the air like smoke, and I stood in it, watching my own family celebrate a marriage that didn't exist anymore. Karen was making the rounds like a politician, kissing cheeks, asking about school plays, pretending to give a damn. I took a sip of my beer, eyes on her. And that's when I saw it. She wasn't just performing. She was preparing. She leaned in to whisper something to our daughter-in-law, Melissa, who laughed politely, then glanced over at me with a strange, tight-lipped smile. A knowing smile, like she was in on something. A switch flipped inside my head. I started scanning faces. Her sister Patty, my niece Rachel, even our son, Ben. All of them were looking at me a little off, as if I was the guest of honor at a party no one thought I deserved. And then it hit me. She told them. Not about the cheating. No. She told them something else. Something twisted. Something meant to paint her as the victim, me as the villain. I didn't know the script yet, but I could feel it hanging in the air, thick like sweat. I walked away from the table and into the house. My hands were steady, but my pulse was drumming in my neck. I reached into the jacket, pulling out the red flash drive again. I stared at it. It was warm from my body heat, but felt like it was burning a hole straight through my chest. 45 years. She was willing to throw it all away, not just quietly, but with flair. And now it looked like she was rewriting the entire story before I could say a word. That's when the door opened behind me. Karen. She stepped into the room like a ghost with perfect posture. No knock. No hello. Just walked in like she owned the place. Like it was still our house. Like she hadn't gutted our marriage and painted over the blood with pastel decorations. Are you hiding in here? She asked softly, faux concern dripping from her voice. I didn't respond. I turned, and we stood across from each other like strangers with shared secrets. Her eyes dropped to my hand. She saw the flash drive. She knew. What's that? She asked, smile faltering just a bit. A truth bomb, I said, calm as a loaded gun. She blinked. Excuse me. I stepped forward, slow and deliberate, my voice low. I know. About the hotels. About your yoga retreats. The sun dipped lower, throwing golden streaks across the lawn as kids chased each other between garden chairs, high on sugar and summer air. The adults sipped their drinks, unaware that the foundation of their celebration was seconds from splitting wide open. Karen was back in her role, dazzling, charismatic, perfectly timed laughter as she walked among our children and grandkids like a living statue of grace and dignity. If I hadn't seen what I saw, if I hadn't read the texts, I might have believed it too. I stayed near the patio, watching her float through the crowd like a damn parade queen. She touched people just enough. A hand on a forearm here. A shoulder squeeze there. And always with a glance toward me when she thought I wasn't watching. She was gauging, measuring, wondering how much I knew and how far I'd go. But what she didn't understand, what she couldn't grasp, was that the man she betrayed wasn't the same man standing here now. I was different. Something inside me had cracked when I saw the video of her in that hotel room, calling him darling, whispering things I hadn't heard from her in years. Words I thought were lost to age, to routine, to the weight of time. But no, she still had them. She just saved them for someone else. The plan was simple now. Let her think she was in control. Let her feel smug, safe. Then let her burn in the truth. Grandpa, Josh called, tugging on my sleeve. Dad says it's time for the toast. I nodded, swallowing the knot in my throat. My oldest son, Matt, was already holding a glass of champagne, motioning to the family to gather by the tables under the string lights. Karen stepped into place beside me again, that mask of warmth so flawlessly glued to her face that even I almost believed it for half a second. Almost. Matt cleared his throat, glass raised. To Mom and Dad. 45 years of love, loyalty, and laughter. You've been the model, the rock, the storybook marriage we all look up to. To many more. Everyone echoed, to many more, and clinked their glasses. I didn't drink. Karen did. And right there, under the crackle of old patio lights, in the weight of a family's blind trust, she leaned over and whispered, like a snake coiling around my neck. You can still walk away from this, Michael. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't fear. It was a dare. I met her eyes and smiled for the first time all day. Not out of joy. Not out of peace. Out of pity. You first, I said. Then I nodded at Josh, who was already standing near the laptop. Just as Karen turned to see what was happening, her smile froze. Because Josh, with the innocence only a 15-year-old could possess, inserted the flash drive. The projector screen flickered to life behind us. At first, no one noticed. The music still played low from the speakers. Our granddaughter Lily danced with a slice of cake in one hand. Karen grinned weakly, realizing something was off, but unsure what. Then the screen brightened fully. The first image was a receipt. A hotel reservation in Savannah under the name K. Dawson. She used her maiden name. That made me laugh when I found it. She thought it'd be clever. The second image was a selfie Karen and him, shirtless, tangled in a hotel bed, timestamped 6 weeks ago. My heart should have exploded. It didn't. It just turned harder. Gasps erupted around us. The sound of forks hitting plates. Chairs scraping back. What the hell is this? Patty whispered, leaning toward the screen. Karen lunged forward. But too late. The next slide, an audio recording. Her voice, breathless, giggling. No, he has no clue. Michael still thinks I'm at my knitting group. Poor guy. The silence that followed was unlike anything I've ever felt. Thick. Total. Not a single bird chirped. Not a breath moved. Karen turned. I starting like a trapped animal, and for the first time that day, she looked straight into my soul. You bastard, she hissed. But I wasn't listening anymore. I turned to the family. You all deserve the truth, I said, loud and clear. Because for 45 years, I believed in a woman who never truly existed. I believed in this marriage. In her. And she played me like a goddamn fool. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just walked away. And as I passed my grandson, I patted his shoulder and whispered, "Don't stop the show." Behind me, the world I built unraveled like a cheap stage curtain yanked off its rail. The screen still flickered, showing slide after brutal slide. Restaurant receipts from places I never took her, photos of her sitting in another man's lap, texts where she described my habits like they were some pitiful joke. My grandchildren stood frozen, some with hands over their mouths, others looking away. My sons, Matt and Ben, were locked in place, their eyes bouncing between the images and their mother, their own mother, now exposed like a fraud under a spotlight she never expected. Karen didn't chase after me. Not yet. She was too busy trying to plug holes in a dam that had already burst. I heard her voice behind me, sharp, rising, trying to spin a web before anyone could form a question. He's twisting this. Michael's not well. You all know that. He's been paranoid for years. But her words slid to the ground like oil on glass. No one was listening. They weren't looking at me anymore. They were looking at her. I walked through the house with a calm I didn't recognize. Not relief. Not pride. Something colder. A precision. A stillness born from exhaustion. I reached the den, shut the door behind me, and sat down. My hand went to my chest, feeling the steady thud of my heart. And for a moment, I didn't know whether I was still angry or just finally done. I had no plan beyond this moment. That flash drive was my final bullet. I had pulled the trigger. The rest was blood and aftermath. A knock came, soft, hesitant. It was Matt. He opened the door slowly, his face pale, eyes too wide. Dad, what the hell? I didn't move. You saw it. He stepped inside, voice low. Is it real? I met his eyes. Every damn bit. He sank into the armchair across from me, elbows on knees, hands clasped like he was trying to hold himself together. She's been lying to us. To everyone. I didn't want to do it like this. I lied. I wanted exactly this. I needed them to see. Matt shook his head. She told Melissa you were losing your mind. That you'd been yelling at shadows. That you forgot her birthday last year. And she didn't want to tell anyone how bad it was getting. That's when it hit me. She didn't just cheat. She spent the last year laying the groundwork to bury me alive, emotionally, socially, making me the crazy old man, the confused one, the paranoid husband clinging to ghosts. The affair wasn't the betrayal. It was the character assassination, the calculated, day-by-day erosion of who I was to everyone who mattered to me. I let that sink in, and the rage finally curled its fingers around my throat. But I didn't let it out. I swallowed it. Rage is loud. Revenge is quiet. Matt sat there, still trying to put the pieces together. What are you going to do now? I looked out the window. Karen was outside again, shouting at Ben now, her hands flying, mascara smudged from tears she probably didn't even feel. The family was scattered in clumps, processing. First, I'm going to eat a piece of cake, I said. Matt blinked. What? I'm starving, I said, standing. Besides, it's still my party. And after that, I looked back at him, a strange peace settling into my chest. After that, I let her try to explain herself. To me. One-on-one. No cameras. No witnesses. Just her and me. Matt didn't say a word. He just watched me walk out. Back into the chaos. Back into the mess. And deep down, I hoped she would follow me. I hoped she'd step into that room when I called for her. Because that would be the beginning of the real war. And I was just getting started. I stepped back onto the patio like a man returning to a battlefield after the smoke had settled. But this war wasn't over. Not even close. The crowd had thinned. Some guests quietly excused themselves. Others lingered like stunned deer in headlights, staring between the projector screen and the shattered pieces of the woman they thought they knew. The cake sat untouched. Its white frosting now looked offensive. Karen stood off to the side, caught in a triangle of confrontation between our sons and her sister Patty. She kept grabbing at their arms, trying to corral sympathy, tossing half-sentences like lifelines. He's unstable. This isn't how it looks. He's been different lately. Patty didn't look convinced. Her face was pale, mouth tight. But Ben, my younger son, was stone. He stared at her with a look I hadn't seen since he was 10 and found out his best friend had stolen from his backpack. "Mom," he said sharply, "just stop talking." That shut her up. I moved toward the table like I was walking through thick fog. I grabbed a plate, cut myself a slice of cake, and took a seat under the string lights. I didn't eat it. I just sat there, fork in hand. I was watching everything unfold around me like a spectator at my own funeral. Karen saw me, and like a wound smelling blood, she moved in. She broke away from Ben and Patty, heels snapping on the concrete, wiping at her tears like they were props. When she reached me, I didn't look up. I simply said, "We need to talk." She hesitated, just enough for me to know she didn't want a real conversation. But she nodded. We walked back into the house in silence. Her perfume trailed behind her, sweet, heavy, suffocating. I led her into the study. It used to be mine. My books, my fishing gear, my desk. Now it felt like a confession box. I shut the door behind her and locked it. She flinched at the sound. I turned slowly. "Sit." She did. Tense. Arms crossed, foot bouncing in those ridiculous heels she wore only when she wanted something. "You humiliated me, Michael," she snapped first. In front of our grandchildren. That was her opening line. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it confirmed everything I feared. She still saw herself as the victim. I walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out another folder. A fat one. I slapped it down on the desk in front of her. "Do you want to go page by page?" I asked. "Or are you ready to just tell me why?" She stared at the folder like it had teeth. "I don't owe you." "You owe me everything, Karen," I cut in. My voice was calm. Too calm. 45 years. I gave you my name, my loyalty, my youth. You gave me betrayal and hotel invoices. I was lonely, she whispered, eyes wide and wet. You weren't there anymore. You stopped looking at me like a woman. I shook my head. No, I stopped looking at you like a liar. But you were one all along, weren't you? She bit her lip. That fake trembling thing she did when she wanted pity. I leaned in, elbows on the desk. Tell me, was it just him? Or were there others? Silence. And then, one of the sickest things I've ever seen. She smiled. Just slightly. But it was there. You think I'd give you the satisfaction of knowing that, she said. That's when I realized. This wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was war. She didn't care about right or wrong. She didn't care about our children. She only cared about control. And now that it was slipping, she'd rather torch everything than lose the last word. I stood up. My hands were steady again. I'm filing tomorrow, I said. She tilted her head. You think they'll take your side after what you did out there? I stepped closer, leaned down, and whispered slowly. I don't need sides. I have proof. She opened her mouth, but nothing came. Then I unlocked the door, opened it wide. You have 10 minutes to gather your things, I said. And I swear, if you take anything that doesn't belong to you, I'll make sure every lawyer in this state sees the contents of that folder. She stood, but she didn't move. And for the first time since I found out, I saw it. Not arrogance, not rage, fear, the real kind. And that was when I knew the storm was just beginning. She didn't say a word, not as she brushed past me out the door, not as her heels echoed down the hall like a drumbeat of defeat, not even as she disappeared into my bedroom to collect whatever belongings she thought she could still claim. I stood in the hallway, staring at the closed door. My fingers flexed. My jaw tightened. I wasn't angry anymore. I was beyond that. I was something colder. Something more exact. Karen had 10 minutes. 10 minutes to pick through the wreckage of the house she tried to burn down. 10 minutes before I made good on my promise. 10 minutes to decide if she wanted this to end with dignity or in flames. She used every second. When she finally re-emerged, she had a single suitcase and her purse clutched in one hand. She didn't look at me. Not directly. Just that sideways glance, the kind she used to throw when she knew she was wrong but would rather choke than admit it. I didn't move. I just watched. Then she opened her mouth. You should have just let it go. That one sentence. It was like acid poured down my spine. Let it go? Like our marriage was a den offender? Like I was the mistake? You wrecked 45 years, I said quietly. And you did it on purpose. She actually had the gall to scoff. You always needed everything to be so black and white. Life doesn't work that way, Michael. I stepped forward, slow, deliberate. No, but betrayal does. That landed. She blinked and turned away, pulling the suitcase behind her like a leash. The sound of the wheels scraping over the hardwood was the final insult. She was walking out of our home with more than just luggage. She carried with her the carcass of everything we built, and she did it without looking back. She reached the front door and paused, hand on the knob. I saw her shoulder rise, like she wanted to say something profound, something final. Instead, she said, "You'll regret this." And she walked out. I didn't follow. I didn't slam the door. I just stood there, listening to the sound of the engine as her car started, backed out, and vanished down the driveway. And then, silence. Not peaceful silence. Not the comforting kind that lets you breathe. No. This silence was the kind that seeps into your bones. That settles in your chest like a weight. The kind that makes every creak of the house feel like a memory scratching to be remembered. I walked back through the house, alone now. Past the patio where the projector screen still stood. Past the wilted balloons, the overturned chairs, the half-eaten cake. The guests had long since scattered. The family left in confused, jagged pieces. My sons had taken their kids home. No one knew what to say. And that was fine. I didn't need words anymore. I returned to the study and sat down at my desk, the folder still untouched. Then I pulled open the drawer one more time. Inside was the second flash drive, the one she didn't know existed. You see, the slideshow outside? That was just Act 1. It was enough to expose her, to make the truth public, to destroy her mask. But this was everything else. The messages where she laughed about my retirement savings being her real safety net. The video where she whispered to him, "Once the house is in my name, I'll tell him. It'll be clean." Bank transfers. Conversations recorded from the baby monitor in our bedroom. Her laying out her timeline. Her plan. Her exit. She didn't just cheat. She plotted. She hunted. The next morning didn't feel like morning. It felt like aftermath. The house was still. The kind of still that makes every tick of the clock feel like a hammer. Dust floated in the sunlight like ash, and the smell of yesterday's punch still clung to the kitchen tile. Balloons, half deflated, hung from the ceiling like bodies from a noose. My coffee tasted like burnt regret, but I drank it anyway. I sat in silence, the second flash drive on the table next to my mug, its little red body pulsing in my mind like a warning light on a dashboard. I hadn't slept. Not a minute. My eyes burned, but my mind sharp. Too sharp. By 8:30, I had already printed out a list. Karen's bank transactions. A detailed timeline from her messages. The name of the man she'd been sleeping with, Jeremy L. Yates. A real estate broker from Atlanta. Divorced. 3 kids. A public Instagram account with captions like "Grind never stops." The man looked like a budget motivational speaker in every photo. Sleeves rolled to his elbows. Flashy watch. Rented smile. She left me for that? I scrolled through his posts, each one a hammer strike. Pictures of Karen. Always cropped to hide her face, but I knew that elbow. That necklace. That damn blue dress I bought her. And then there was a video, muted, posted weeks ago. Jeremy at a backyard party, panning across the table, the camera lingering too long on a woman's laugh just out of frame. That laugh. Karen's laugh. Not the public one. The private one I used to hear when I pulled her into the kitchen and spun her while Sinatra played. God, They always say betrayal feels like a stab in the back. That's wrong. It's slower. That night, the rain came. Not a gentle drizzle, but a full-blown summer storm that lit up the sky like paparazzi flashbulbs outside a scandal. Fitting. It beat against the roof like war drums, wind howling through the trees, nature itself adding its signature to the chaos I'd unleashed. I sat at the dining table, lights off, laptop open, watching the surveillance footage from our home security system. Another gift from the woman who thought she was the only one playing chess. She insisted on upgrading the cameras a year ago, said she felt unsafe after a news report about a nearby break-in. I paid for the install. She paid with arrogance. Turns out, she never learned how to disable the automatic cloud backup. One clip showed her pacing the living room, phone to her ear, whispering to Jeremy just weeks before the anniversary. Her voice low, clipped. Not affectionate, strategic. Cold. She was coordinating something. Coordinating him. Trying to sync a schedule without raising suspicion. He wasn't just her escape. He was part of a plan. Another clip. Karen sitting at the dining table, the same chair I was in now, on a video call. Her voice sugar-coated. The kind she used with people she wanted to manipulate. Once the paperwork's filed, we'll move slow. We don't want Michael spiraling. Spiraling. That's what she called it. My reaction to the death of our marriage. My pain. My dignity being ripped out by the roots. To her, it was just a PR risk. And then came the bombshell. I found a screen recording she must have accidentally saved on her iPad. It showed her logging into my private retirement account portal. She knew the credentials. She'd been watching it, taking notes, timing her exit like a Wall Street analyst trying to cash out before a crash. She had written reminders in her calendar to bring up joint access around our anniversary. She planned to make it a gift. Let's retire together, she would say. Let's consolidate. Trust me. All lies. All of it. I stared at her face frozen on the screen, mouth half open mid-laugh. And I thought about the years, decades, we spent building a life. The sacrifices I made. The things I forgave. The small betrayals I swept under the rug because I believed in her. And she used that belief as cover. I closed the laptop. This wasn't about pain anymore. This was about justice. About accountability. About warning shots. The next morning, Paul sent me an update. He had reached out to Jeremy's ex-wife, Cynthia. Turns out, she had her own folder. Her own screenshots. Her own rage. She and Jeremy had split 2 years ago, but he'd been trying to renegotiate alimony, claiming hardship, while Karen funded vacations and weekend getaways in Asheville and Hilton Head. Cynthia wanted blood, and suddenly, we were allies. I agreed to meet her at a neutral place, an old-school diner on Route 7. She walked in wearing a leather jacket and zero patience. No small talk. She dropped a manila envelope on the table. Here's your proof of fraud. Here's the messages he sent me while he was with your wife. I want him ruined. I liked her immediately. We talked for an hour. Swapped timelines. Compared notes. It was like watching puzzle pieces fall into place faster than I could have dreamed. Jeremy hadn't just seduced Karen. He'd coached her, helped her plan the divorce, helped her calculate spousal leverage, helped her hide assets, all while playing victim in his own life. You ever met a man who could lie so smooth you started doubting your own gut? Cynthia asked, sipping her coffee. I nodded. I used to sleep beside one. She laughed at that. A real, bitter laugh. The kind you only earn after surviving betrayal. When we parted ways, I handed her a copy of the second flash drive. Use what you want, I told her. Just give me a heads up if you go nuclear. Her eyes narrowed. Oh, honey. I already launched the missile. I drove home with the windows down, rain still in the air, the wind sharp and cool on my skin. For the first time in weeks, I felt alive. Not happy. Not healed. Alive. I pulled into the driveway and saw something on the porch. A white envelope. No stamp. No name. Just sitting there like a loaded trap. I picked it up, turned it over, and saw the faint, unmistakable handwriting. Michael, please read this before you decide anything. Karen's handwriting. I stared at it for a long time. Then I walked inside, set it on the table next to the flash drive, and lit a match. I watched the flame eat her words. The paper curled, blackened at the edges, then folded in on itself like it was ashamed of what it was. The waxy gloss of the envelope melted quick, giving off a stench that reminded me of melted lipstick, something synthetic pretending to be soft. Karen's handwriting disappeared under the orange glow like her apologies didn't even have the decency to scream. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. If her letter had held any truth, she wouldn't have left it on the damn porch like some cowardly Easter egg. She would have stood in front of me, barefaced, stripped of performance, and owned what she did. But that letter wasn't a confession. It was an insurance policy. A soft little landmine, designed to make me hesitate. Designed to make me wonder if maybe, just maybe, she still had a piece of my heart in her hands. But she didn't. She threw that heart in a motel trash can and covered it with takeout containers. When the fire died, I scooped the ashes into a mason jar and screwed the lid on tight, just in case I ever forgot. The next few days were a quiet frenzy. Paul moved like a man possessed, coordinating filings, freezing joint assets, drawing up restraining orders before Karen could make her own play. Every move she might have considered, we were there first. I made it my mission to stay 3 steps ahead because I finally understood something. Karen didn't want closure. She wanted control. And when she couldn't hold the marriage hostage anymore, she was going to try and rewrite history. I beat her to it. With Cynthia's help, we uncovered that Jeremy had been funneling money into a side LLC, one that Karen had access to. Vacant accounts in Delaware. Dubious wire transfers. Karen, the same woman who needed help setting up her email, had apparently become fluent in financial manipulation the moment it served her escape plan. But the best part? The LLC was registered in both their names, which meant when Cynthia blew the whistle on Jeremy, Karen would go down with him. Same boat. Same leak. Same slow, delicious drowning. It was all unraveling. And fast. That's when I got the second message from Jeremy. No voicemail this time. Just a text. Whatever your endgame is, you're not walking away clean either. You've embarrassed your kids. Your grandkids. You think you look like a hero, but you're a joke. Call me. No name attached. But I knew that smug tone. That swagger that comes from someone who's only ever been punched in the face metaphorically, and even then, probably not hard enough. I didn't reply. I forwarded the message to Paul, to Cynthia, and to an old friend of mine, Ethan Walden, a semi-retired reporter who owed me a favor. Ethan had a small but devastating podcast about small-town corruption and scandal. He lived for stories like this. When I sent him the timeline, the screenshots, the financial records, he replied with one line. This is a sermon wrapped in napalm. We met in his garage-turned-studio 2 nights later. Just me, Ethan, and his recorder. No scripts. No filters. Just my voice and the truth. I told him everything from the iPad discovery to the slideshow at the anniversary. I left names out for now, but I laid out the structure of betrayal like a war map. You sure you want this public? He asked, after an hour of taping. Once this drops, it's out of your hands. I looked him in the eye. That's exactly where I want it. He nodded, reached across the table, and hit the big red stop button. The story was scheduled to release the following week. Just enough time for Karen and Jeremy to feel the floor tremble before it dropped out entirely. When I got back home that night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat on the porch. Not to think. Not to reminisce. Just to be. I watched the wind slide through the trees. I listened to the insects. I felt the weight of 45 years begin to shift off my shoulders, one cracked vertebra at a time. That's when a car pulled up. Not hers. Not Jeremy's. It was Matt. My son. He stepped out, hands in his pockets, eyes unreadable. Can I sit? He asked. Always, I said. We didn't speak for a while. Just sat. 2 men, father and son, both struggling to adjust to a new version of their past. Finally, he said, I think Mom's staying at Aunt Patty's. She won't talk to us. I didn't answer. She told Rachel you manipulated her. That you made the whole thing look worse than it was. I let out a breath through my nose. She's scared. She's dangerous. I looked over at him then. My boy. My flesh. His jaw clenched just like mine did at his age. His eyes tired. But alive. You okay? I asked. He nodded. I think I am now. And for the first time since it all started, I let my head lean back, eyes to the sky, and I felt it. Peace? Not quite. But something close. something that smelled like the prelude to justice. And just before Matt left, he turned to me and said, "Whatever you do next, don't stop." I smiled. "Oh, I won't." The podcast dropped at 6 a.m. on a Wednesday. By 6:17, my phone was vibrating like a dying insect. Unknown numbers. 2 blocked calls. A text from Cynthia that just said, "He's going to lose his ***ing mind. God bless." Asterisk. By 6:34, the local Facebook mom groups were already spinning up with cryptic posts like, "Listening to episode 49 of Quiet Fires. Jaw is on the floor." And I knew something was off about that woman at the library gala. And by 7:02, the gloves were off. Karen's sister, Patty, texted me. "I just heard it. I'm sorry." She's not the person I thought she was. I stared at that message longer than I probably should have. Not because it surprised me, but because of what it meant. The facade had cracked. And not just in my house. This was spreading. People who once called her a pillar were now whispering that they'd always wondered. People we used to host for wine nights were suddenly rewatching every interaction with new eyes. I didn't smile, but I felt something burn low in my chest. Not satisfaction. Not yet. But momentum. The podcast didn't name her. Not directly. But the timeline, the details, it wouldn't take much for anyone in our town to put it together. Especially not with the screenshots circulating. Ethan had released just enough. Blurred names. Cropped photos. But the style of the bracelet, the baby blue dress, the grainy reflection of Jeremy's Range Rover in one photo's background, it was practically a signature. By noon, I got a message from my lawyer, Paul. Her attorney just called. They're spooked. She wants to resolve matters quickly and quietly. She's trying to get ahead of it. Wants to meet? I stared at that message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. Then I called him. Set the meeting. But not at her lawyer's office. Where then? My house, I said. She started the fire here. She can walk through the ashes herself. Paul paused. You sure? I've never been more. The meeting was scheduled for the following day at 5 p.m. I spent that morning preparing, not with papers or evidence, but with silence. I opened all the windows. Let the late summer air creep in. I cleaned the kitchen, brewed fresh coffee, sat at the table and played Sinatra's In the Wee Small Hours on vinyl like I used to when we were happy. It was petty, deliberate. I wanted every inch of this house to remind her what she had torched. 5 minutes before 5, I stood by the living room window, watching a black SUV pull into the driveway. She stepped out, alone, wearing muted colors, no jewelry, no makeup. The hair that used to take an hour to perfect now thrown into a loose bun. A look meant to communicate humility. She was performing again, but not for me. I opened the door before she knocked. We didn't speak, just stared for a beat. She stepped in, and for a moment, the air between us was a coffin. I gestured to the dining table. She sat. I sat opposite. The coffee steamed between us like a peace offering neither of us wanted. Then she spoke. Michael, I'm not here to fight. I said nothing. I want to make this right. For the kids. For the grandkids. Still, I said nothing. She continued. You embarrassed me. Hurt me. But I understand why. I crossed a line. I made mistakes. Mistakes, I echoed, finally. She flinched. You built a second life behind my back. You planned your exit like a military operation. You manipulated the people who loved you most. And now you want forgiveness? I want to end this with some grace. I leaned in. You started this with cruelty. Her eyes welled up. It wasn't the real kind. I could see it. The shake in her voice, perfectly timed. The way her hands stayed too still, folded like a schoolgirl's. You don't have to ruin me. I nodded slowly. That's where you're wrong. She looked at me now, fully, like she was searching for the man she used to be able to sway with a well-placed sigh or soft-spoken guilt. But I wasn't him anymore. You didn't care about our marriage when you signed hotel receipts in Savannah. You didn't care about the kids when you let him laugh at our family over the phone. And you sure as hell didn't care about Grace when you handed me divorce papers in front of everyone I love. Her lip quivered. I pushed a folder across the table. Here's what I want. No alimony. Full control of the house. You walk away with what's in your personal account and your car. That's it. She blinked. That's not fair. You're lucky I'm not charging you rent for the last year. She opened the folder, flipping through it with shaking hands. She didn't argue further. She just asked one thing. What happens if I don't sign? I stood, walked to the kitchen, and picked up a small remote. I clicked it. The TV screen blinked to life. A clip played. Jeremy, shirtless, in our home. Her voice giggling in the background. He won't be home till 4. Her breath caught. I clicked pause. You already destroyed the story. I just made sure it aired. I turned back. Sign it, Karen. And after a full minute, she did. Her hands moved slowly, like she wanted the ink to beg for mercy. She slid the papers back. I nodded. She stood. We didn't say goodbye. She opened the door. Paused. I loved you, once. I looked at her like a stranger. Yeah, and I loved a ghost. The door clicked shut behind her, and I exhaled for real this time. 3 days passed. 3 full days of silence. No new messages. No sudden visits. Just the slow, satisfying hum of fallout settling where it belonged, on her shoulders, not mine. The podcast episode had exploded beyond anything Ethan or I predicted. Over 400,000 downloads by Friday night. Local forums were dissecting the timeline like it was a crime documentary. The Reddit thread Ethan linked to in his show notes had gone viral, thousands of comments, and more than a few keyboard sleuths who cracked the full names with ease. Karen's name was no longer protected. Neither was Jeremy's. By Saturday, Jeremy's brokerage firm had released a public statement announcing a temporary suspension pending internal review. And Cynthia, God bless her steel spine, had already filed a formal fraud complaint with the state. With my evidence added to hers, the investigation was moving faster than either of us expected. A house of cards collapsing in slow motion. And all I had to do was watch. I didn't feel joy. Not yet. It was something deeper than joy. Righteousness. Saturday night, Matt and Ben stopped by. No wives. No grandkids. Just the two of them. My sons, looking shell-shocked and tired, like they'd finally realized they grew up in a house with a stranger. They sat in the living room, where all this had begun, where the first flicker of doubt had formed behind my eyes. She's been calling us, Matt said first, cracking a beer. Ben followed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Texting too. Long messages. Voice memos. All the same playbook. Your father is manipulating you. He's trying to poison the family. I let them talk. I didn't need to say anything. Truth defends itself. I had nothing left to prove. Ben finally looked at me. You ever wonder how long she was like this? That was the question, wasn't it? I thought back to the early years. Before the kids. Before the mortgages. When I still saw stars in her eyes and not strategy. Yeah, I said. But I've stopped trying to guess. It doesn't matter who she used to be. Only who she showed herself to be when it counted. Matt nodded slowly, like something had clicked into place for the first time. Ben leaned back, exhaling. You did the right thing, Dad. Every bit of it. They left after midnight. No awkward hugs. Just firm grips on my shoulder. That was how men in this family communicated love. We didn't say it. We showed it. Sunday morning, I got the final call. Not from Karen. Not from Paul. From Jeremy. Blocked number. I answered. Mr. Adams. Calm. Too calm. I didn't respond. You win. Okay. You win. Is that what you want to hear? I stayed silent. He sighed. Look. We can make this stop. The stories. The podcasts. You got your revenge. Just pull the rest of this down before it gets worse. I could hear the desperation hiding under the calm. What makes you think I have that kind of control? I finally said. You know damn well you do. You could ask your reporter friend to back off. You could convince Cynthia to slow the legal stuff. I'm asking you man to man. Man to man. This little rat. This parasite. Asking for honor now? You dragged your dirt into my home. You played house with my wife. You laughed at my family behind my back. And now you want mercy because the world saw what you are. Silence on the line. I could practically hear him grinding his teeth. Don't call me again, I said. Next time, call your lawyer. And I hung up. That afternoon, I went to the attic. There was something I hadn't touched in years. A box labeled Anniversary 25. Photos. Cards. Letters. Karen in her favorite sundress. Us in Charleston. Her handwriting, still sweet, still lies. I burned it all. Not out of hate. Out of cleansing. 45 years. That's what they took from me. But I still had one thing left. my name, my peace. And tomorrow, I'd take back the last piece of it. Because tomorrow was court. The courthouse smelled like bleach and old wood. The walls were too white, too clean, like they were trying to erase the sins whispered between them. I sat in the hallway outside courtroom B, folder in my lap, suit crisp, shoes shined. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, because I wanted to walk in like a man who had already won. Paul sat beside me, calm as ever, tie slightly crooked like it always was, a coffee in hand that smelled like he'd reheated it twice. Karen's here, he said without looking up from his phone. Down the hall. With her attorney. I didn't turn my head. I didn't need to. The door opened at exactly 10 a.m. The bailiff called the case. And I walked in like I owned the air itself. Karen was already seated at the respondent's table. She didn't look at me. Not once. Her lawyer, young, sharp, desperate, whispered something in her ear. She nodded, jaw tight. Her skin was pale. Paler than I'd ever seen it. The woman who once commanded every room she entered now sat like a scolded intern hoping no one noticed her. The judge entered. Middle-aged. Tired. Efficient. He read the file. Read the evidence. Read the terms of the settlement Karen had already signed. Then he looked up. Mrs. Adams, he said, tone dry, I see you've agreed to waive spousal support and relinquish claim to the primary residence. Do you do so voluntarily and without coercion? Karen didn't speak right away. Her lawyer gave her a nudge. Yes, Your Honor, she finally said. Her voice was quiet. Hollow. A woman with nothing left to trade. And Mr. Adams, the judge turned to me. Do you wish to proceed with the dissolution as outlined in this agreement? I stood. I do. It was poetic, in a way. Those same words I'd once said at the altar. Now repurposed for the funeral of our marriage. The judge nodded. Then this court recognizes the marriage between Michael Allen Adams and Karen Elise Adams as legally dissolved. Bang. Gavel down. Just like that, 45 years ended in 5 words and one hollow thud of wood on wood. We rose. Karen turned to leave first. But I stepped in front of her, just once, just briefly. She looked up at me, face unreadable. I hope it was worth it, I said, not in anger. Just in truth. She opened her mouth. Closed it again. Then walked past me without a single word. Outside, the sun was blinding. I didn't flinch. I walked down the courthouse steps like I was walking into the next chapter of a book I didn't write, but would finally finish. I went home, changed into jeans and an old fishing shirt. I drove out to the lake with a cooler full of beer and an old rod I hadn't touched in years. And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I didn't think about her. I didn't think about revenge. I didn't think about court dates, lies, hotel rooms, or what I'd lost. I just listened to the water slap the side of the boat, to the wind whisper through the trees, to silence that finally meant peace. And when the sun started to dip, golden and slow, I raised a bottle toward the sky. To 45 years, I said, and to the truth that finally buried them. Then I smiled, real, deep, and tired, and I let it all go.